If you're the kind of person who pulls an all-nighter trying to get that perfect pad for a new track, and you've already spent a few hours scrolling through endless synth forums, you know the feeling. Do I really need another analog monster, or am I just buying hype? I get that hesitation a lot, especially when you're about to drop a few $100 on something that could end up sitting on a shelf, dust-covered, while you move on to the next shiny toy. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about why the Prophet Rev2 matters in the sea of synths that promise vintage vibe and classic tone. This is a 61-key, 8-voice analog synth that brings the iconic dual DCO architecture back into a fairly modern workflow. That means each note you play actually gets two digitally controlled oscillators fighting for your ear, and the low-pass filters are the classic Curtis designs that have been the backbone of countless 80s hits. In practice, that translates to a rich, warm sound that's instantly recognizable, especially if you've ever tried to recreate that lush string section from a movie score or that pulsing bass line from an early electronic record. But before you get carried away, think about the studio layout you actually have. The Rev2 isn't a tabletop unit you can just toss on a cramped desk and forget about. Its 61-key keyboard is full-size, which is great if you already own a comfortable synth-oriented workstation, but it also means you need decent desk space or a rack setup that can accommodate its width. I've seen a lot of creators trying to squeeze it into a tiny home studio corner and end up with one hand on the keyboard and the other wrestling with the power cable. If you're already cramped, you might be better off with a more compact, perhaps 25-key, analog module that can sit on a rack. Now, who should actually click add to cart on this one? If you're a composer who relies on layering complex chords, the 8-voice polyphony is a genuine boon. Imagine playing a full-range chord progression, then adding a soaring lead on top. The Rev2 can handle both simultaneously because each voice gets its own dual DCO pair. That's a level of flexibility you don't get on many 4-voice units. Likewise, producers who love bitimbral setups will appreciate being able to split the keyboard, assign one sound to the lower half and another to the upper half, without needing an extra synth. The built-in Polyphonic step sequencer is also a practical tool. You can program a looping arpeggio, record it live, then tweak the parameters in real time. I've watched a friend use that feature to drive an entire ambient track, letting the synth do the heavy lifting while they focus on mixing. On the flip side, if you're mainly a beat maker who works primarily with sample-based drums and a few simple synth stabs, the Rev2 might be overkill. Its analog architecture demands a bit of patience when you're tweaking parameters. That's not a bad thing, it's just a different workflow than a plugin where you can type in numbers and hit apply in milliseconds. The learning curve is real, and while the knobs are well spaced, you'll spend a good chunk of time dialing in the perfect resonance or waveshape setting before you feel comfortable. If you don't plan to spend time shaping sounds from the ground up, you might find yourself reaching for a preset that still sounds generic, defeating the whole analog reason. One area where the Rev2 shines is its onboard effects engine. While many synths just give you dry output and expect you to head to a separate effects rack, this unit packs reverb, delay, and some subtle modulation that can add depth without dragging in an external processor. The practical benefit shows up when you're recording live takes and want an instant, polished vibe. A simple patch with a bit of chorus on the high strings can sound like a full-blown production, giving you headroom to focus on performance rather than post-processing. However, there are hidden trade-offs that only become apparent after the first few weeks of use. The bitimbral operation, while powerful, also demands precise routing in your DAW. If you're accustomed to assigning a single output per synth, you'll need to map two separate audio channels for the split sounds. That's not a nightmare, but it does add a step you'll need to remember each session. Also, the analog nature means the synth can drift slightly in pitch over long periods, especially in hot rooms. I know a few musicians who keep a tuner nearby and recalibrate every few hours. It's a small inconvenience, but it's part of the analog charm many love. Just be aware it's not a digital, perfectly stable instrument. From a value perspective, the Prophet Rev2 sits in a price range that's higher than entry-level analog synths but lower than some flagship digital workstations that promise similar polyphony. The real value comes from the heritage of the Curtis filters and the dual DCOs per voice. If you've spent years